look at the cattle industry, especially where TenCorp sees the cattle industry going, what you'll find is in the upper Midwest where we are, where we fight rain and mud, the barn is the only solution going forward. If you look at what it costs for manure maintenance in an outdoor lot, probably $150 to $200 a year, pretty easy. By the time you bed, haul the bedding in, haul the bedding out, store all that manure, compost it, haul it to the fields. When you're doing that, you're hauling dirt out, and then you have to haul dirt back in. Tires on spreaders and payloaders, all those things. $150 to $200 per headspace per year on an open lot. And those are our numbers, but every feeder knows their own numbers. So if you really think about it, when you look at a cattle facility that's somewhere between $1,600 and maybe $2,000 a head, depending on options, maybe $2,200 a head, depending on enclosed working facilities, all those things. All you're really doing is prepaying your manure management and pen maintenance for a decade. Because now you're taking all that money that really isn't gaining anything except maintenance. Now you're putting it into an asset. And so you're taking your pen maintenance and making a payment with it instead. And then at the end of the time, you have an incredible asset that you'll be feeding cattle in for 40 years with extremely low maintenance. When you think of, even in the South, it makes a lot of sense. These barns really shine in the summer. They do great in the winter, especially when we get a lot of fall rain, when we get a lot of, sometimes it rains a lot in December. When we get those thaws in January some years and that mud comes in, they really shine. But in the summer, when it's hot, it's 100 plus degrees and the humidity's high, these barns are cool. They're always 15 to 20 degrees cooler inside because they're shaded. If the cattle are comfortable, all cattle are going to back off feed when it's miserable hot out. But when our outdoor pens have backed off basically 100%, our indoor cattle have backed off 25%. So it's more consistent. So no matter where you are, it makes sense. And certainly throughout the Midwest, when you can reutilize that manure, all that manure goes onto our grounds. We don't use commercial fertilizer where we use this cattle manure because we knife it right into the ground. So reduction of labor is another huge part of the cattle confinement, cattle building. Don't use confinement, edit that out. But labor is another huge savings on a cattle building. Where 1,000 head outdoor cattle probably have 2 guys for every 1,000 head. 1,000 head cattle building, 1 guy part-time work. It's just that simple. We have operations out there that are 10,000 head that require 4 full-time employees. And once you take the pen maintenance out of things, you realize there's a lot of hours in the day to feed cattle, doesn't take very long, and then to walk cattle, treat cattle, so your attention is shifting from keeping pens clean to the health and consistency of the cattle. I look at the cattle industry where it's concerned about cattle buildings, and the future is the cattle building. We have to take the elements out of it. We have to take the environment out of it so we can just feed cattle consistency. What I know when I put my cattle in a building is if I buy the same cattle every year, about the same time of year, put them in the building the same time of year, my performance is going to be almost identical year in and year out, and that gives you predictability. And in a market where predictability is everything, the barns make the perfect sense. I never have a surprise at the end. When the days when I used to feed cattle outside and you'd have them in the mud, and if you get a really bad year or a really cold year, a really muddy year, and the cattle, instead of gaining 4 pounds a day, gain 3 pounds a day, that really destroys the profitability of those cattle, and you can never gain it back. So really levels the playing field on consistency and predictability in the cattle. Yeah, TenCorp has been building cattle buildings for longer than anybody else in the business. And over the years, we have to change the design a little bit here, a little bit there, but always based on how we feed cattle and what we see our cattle performance is. We also look at, the most economical way to build without sacrificing quality. So there's a few different ways that we look at it. The 2 main buildings we build, it would be a fully enclosed cattle building, or what we call an Iowa-style building, which is 10% outside to the south. Still 100% on slats, still all your manure is contained, but we just pull the roof line back 10%. And in the state of Iowa, That means it's an outdoor lot that's fully contained, which is very friendly to permitting, which it should be because everything's contained. It's basically having a lagoon underneath the cattle's feet is how it's looked at. Now, that being said, in other states where you don't have the advantage on permitting, it's still important to recognize that that 10% out model gives you a lot more sun in the winter, and you still have all the cooling effects in the summer. It also is about $100 a head space cheaper to build. It's a very efficient way to build a cattle building. I personally feed cattle in both styles of those buildings, and I can't tell the difference in performance between either one. So for me, it's just a matter of if it's more cost effective without giving up any quality. I like that as a very good option. One thing TenCorp's always focused on is quality. We always work with the builders. There's different ways to build. We have what we would call a baseline building, still a very high quality building for about $1,600 a head space, and that would include your dirt work. All the way up to, you can get to $2,000 a head space depending on different variations in mats, you can put plywood on the roof that protects the steel longer. So again, no matter what we sell, it's going to be a high quality product, but just like anything, if you buy a, brand new Chevy Suburban versus the Escalade, it's just options at what you think will be better for you, what it looks like in the long term. You get the same great service from TenCorp, you get the same quality. We do a lot of enclosed working facilities on a cattle barn, so that obviously is a very nice option to have. We have a high premium TenCorp rubber that we worked with Easy Fix to design. We're very proud of that rubber. We took a product that Easy Fix has been using for probably about 5 years at that time. They had really redid their rubber and made this incredible product, long lasting. And we took that design, added a lot of traction to it, made it about 25% heavier, working with them on the design. We're very proud of that because what we see our cattle, they stay cleaner on the premium rubber and there's more traction. So two very important things when you think about feeding cattle. So we had an advantage when it came to looking at that rubber and what we wanted in design because again, we feed cattle in our own buildings.